Welcome back to another edition of LEO Radio. I'm Joey Sperlazza, joined with Colin Congleton. We're going to continue our leadership series, and we're going to continue our breakdown of Extreme Ownership by Jocko. I've loved this podcast so far. I've loved everything we've been doing, and leads us right into part 3, Sustaining Victory Plan. First key principle we want to break down. Planning begins with mission analysis. Leaders must identify clear directives for the team. A broad and ambiguous mission results in lack of focus, ineffective execution, and mission creep.
This is really where your more mid-level and senior leadership is going to be primarily responsible for this. And you got to know your stuff. This is where developing yourself as a professional over the course of your career to prepare yourself for these leadership challenges for this specific kind of role is really important. If you wait until you're in that seat and tasked with doing this, you're going to have a bad time, right? So with that being said, we see this all the time. There's just for example, we'll talk about, okay, we need to address crime suppression. Okay, well, I mean, that's an incredibly broad mission, right? Let's dive into that and be specific and make sure that people understand what their individual roles are when we attack the mission, right? And so are we going after violent crime? Are we going after property crime? Are we going after drug crime? And again, be specific. That focus is really important, and especially for your boots on the ground folks to understand what their focus should be on and how they can effectively execute the mission. So
I have a couple other quick quotes from that section that I really like to hone in on. Once they themselves understand the mission, they can impart this knowledge to their key leaders and frontline troops tasked with executing the mission. The mission must be carefully refined and simplified so that it is explicitly clear and specifically focused to achieve the greater strategic vision for what that mission is apart. And that ties into exactly what you just said. It can't be so ambiguous and so grandiose that it's not smart, right? Specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, timely. The goals have to be smart. We're never going to eliminate crime. So the altruistic goal of crime elimination is impossible. But how can we achieve that? And breaking that down into smaller, easily identified goals. That's how we can accomplish that. And then goes right into frontline troops tasked with executing the mission must understand the deeper purpose behind the mission. And obviously, a lot of that has to do with quality of life, our taking care of our residents, getting bad people off of the streets, part of what we do in law enforcement. It's very important, but it all ties back together. And you can see how everything in the preceding chapters, everything that we've talked about in our preceding episodes leads right into these points. But it's exactly what you said, right? You have to have a specific goal within the goal.
Yeah. And there's a couple of things with this too. So, they talk about in those quotes that you brought up, the boots on the ground people executing the mission, right? That clear communication and being very clear on, what the commander's intent is, what the actual driving purpose behind the mission is so important. You tell a guy, you got to go out and write tickets, and you don't tell him that, hey, behind that is we're getting complaints from residents in a particular area, parents from this school about speeders at a certain time. And all you're telling them is, hey, go over to this area and write tickets. They're going to go out and bang parking tickets. Hey, they're writing tickets, right? But is that addressing the issue? So, that communication is really critical. The other thing with this too is once they clearly understand all the parts, right, and they have a clear, concise understanding of the mission and the focus and the execution, the directives, you got to be open to feedback from them too. You're going to have hopefully some people in your chain of command down the chain that are bright people, that are experienced, that have some expertise perhaps, And you can get some great ideas from them about how you may want to go about accomplishing the mission or executing the directives, right? So here again, check your ego as a leader and keep that servant leader attitude and think, I want to help build up my people, get them involved, give them some ownership in their role, and give them some practice at you know doing the things that are typically reserved for further up the chain. That's going to be great experience for them if you include them in the planning process.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up like traffic enforcement when it comes to planning. We have one of my captains, he bestilled this upon me. When we're sent on a traffic mission, it should be education, engineering, enforcement. Those are the three E's he brings up. So educate drivers as we're pulling them over. If there's engineering deficiencies, we identify those and we take care of those. And then obviously there's the enforcement action, but especially with school zones. If you have a long straightaway that's a 25-mile-an-hour zone and none of us could help but do 50 miles an hour on it, maybe look at some alternative, maybe add speed humps into the area, maybe putting in rumble strips so that people are reminded of what the speed limit would be. But there's other ways that we could be outside the box. That goes right into the decentralized command process, pushing it as far down as possible. I guarantee a lot of the chiefs aren't driving the street where you're getting these speeding complaints. But when you have the frontline troops that are out there and they're seeing this, everybody's doing 40 miles an hour because it feels natural to do 40 miles an hour on that stretch of roadway.
Right.
Maybe there's an engineering aspect that we could do. The answer is not always tickets. The answer is not always enforcement, but maybe we need to educate people, or maybe there's an engineering deficiency. So
Yeah.
again, that goes into bringing people up from the bottom that are down there, saying every single car is doing 40 miles an hour, and I think we could identify an engineering aspect of it.
Yeah, one thing I would throw out too, and I know we could easily go down a rabbit hole with this, and I'm not trying to do that here, but just one point because it is something I feel very strongly about. Um, I think more of our guys and our leaders should understand that tickets should never be the objective. They're a tool at our disposal to achieve the objective, which is to change behavior, right? If you're measuring your cops' performance by the number of summonses they write, I would suggest you're doing it wrong. And I understand, not every place is gonna, be ripe for drug arrests and gun arrests and all that kind of stuff. I get that, but there are so many other ways to impact your community, serve your community, and to gauge the performance of your officers and their productivity and what they're doing. Citizen contacts is a good one. Um, there's all sorts of ways, but judging guys or telling them you got to go out and bang tickets. Well, what me personally, my thing was always, for the most part, nearly every single vehicle I ever stopped, my intent there was to have a conversation to change their behavior. Sometimes obviously you have really egregious stuff where there's a major safety issue and there has to be enforcement. And that's those are few and far between. Normally, when I stopped a car, it was to have a conversation. Now, if I got the idea during the course of that stop that a conversation wasn't going to change the behavior, so be it. Then I started looking for other options, such as the summons, right? But that's based on the driver and how they respond to the conversation, right? The ticket is not the objective. It's a tool to achieve the objective. And I'll get off my soapbox on that.
And the old perception, I guess, that there were cops had tickets. That's why there were a lot of tickets issued at the beginning of the month. I can say wholeheartedly, my department, I'm sure in your department, and now that I've exposed myself to so many other departments, it's not real. There's no quotas out there. I would say a majority of this officers on my squad write zero summonses, and I don't bust their balls because they're doing other productive things. Not every officer needs to be doing motor vehicle work, but it's again, not to be go too hard into that aspect of policing, but that adage or perception is completely false. I can tell you from this side of the table for anyone that's not in law enforcement watching. But to get into the next point, leaders must delegate the planning process down the chain as much as possible to key subordinate leaders. Team leaders within the greater team and frontline, tactical level leaders must have ownership of their tasks within the overall plan and mission. Team participation, even from the most junior personnel, is critical in developing bold, innovative solutions to problem sets. And there was another side quote that I had from the book, aside from the notes that we've been working off of. Giving the frontline troops ownerships of even a small piece of the plan gives them buy-in, helps them understand the reasons behind the plan, and better enables them to believe in the mission, which translates to far more effective implementation and execution on the ground. What do you think?
100%, 100%. And this actually, it's funny that right there and the previous quote about team participation and innovative solutions to problem sets. That's exactly what we were just talking about a moment ago, right? With how valuable it is to give your subordinates that experience to participate in the planning process. This is it. It's funny because I didn't look ahead to this bullet, but it's exactly what we were just touching on. So yeah, really tremendous opportunity every time you get into planning to involve your subordinates, let them have some ownership, let them have some input. You don't always have to go with every plan they offer. Maybe you want to tweak their plan, even if it ends up being your plan, but you let them think it's theirs. You're going to get that buy-in. You're gonna have people that are much more motivated to go out and do the work when they feel that they've been heard and respected, and that this is as much their plan as it is yours.
So that shooting I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, where I was with your guys over at Pacific Avenue, we it was a couple of days before New Year's Eve, and I was talking to your sergeant, captain, a couple other guys on scene, and I was like, "Oh, you guys have a big order for New Year's Eve?" And like, no, it's just another day for us. There's nothing too crazy going on. Whereas for my department, we order in our entire department. Every single person that's has a day off, you're ordered in, you're being brought in, etc. So when I got hired, I knew that that was a thing here because in the past, New Year's Eve had fights, they had a bunch of brawls, especially in Hoboken. We have a lot of problems with the bars that are right next to the train station there. But anyway, I knew from the beginning we all got ordered in, but now I actually understand why we got ordered in. And this wasn't never explained to me, and I kind of figured it out. So we deal with trains, we deal with the transportation in and out of New York City. We have 24-hour rail service in and out of New York City on that day. What if there was a major service interruption? What if there was a major incident that happened? We know that last year, little over 365 days ago, in January of New Year's Eve, going into the January from 2022 going into 2023, there were New York City officers that were attacked. Could you imagine if you were understaffed for such a major event? Could you imagine if you didn't have the proper personnel, proper supervision in on that day? Now, granted, especially for some of our younger officers, I'm sure a lot of them want to spend time with their friends and family and go enjoy their youth out in possibly even New York City or even Hoboken. But now that I understand it, I make sure to put it out to the guys. We're being
Yeah,
brought in not because we are worried about a fight. We're being brought in because of there's a potential for major incidents. We need all boots on the ground. We need to make sure every station is secure. We know terrorists are looking at this. We know that people that are bad are looking at this. We know that there's a lot of crimes for that are even at the petty level because there's so many people out. There's going to be a lot of opportunities for pickpocketers because of how many people are intoxicated. We need as many people as possible on that day. And now I make sure to put that out as part of leading up until this day. It sucks getting ordered in on a holiday. Nobody wants to
yeah.
do that.
And as
But
a new guy, if your boss is telling you you're ordered in and you're thinking, why? It's my scheduled day off. This is
yep,
bullshit. And the answer is because I said so,
yep.
right? Or you're under the impression that it's because bar fights.
Or
You
it's
know,
even worse when it says I got ordered in. Now you're getting ordered in.
yeah. If I'm
Not
getting it, you're getting it too, right? That's
absolutely
awful. And now
terrible.
you got a guy. Now you got a guy out there working who's disgruntled,
Yep,
who's starting out pissed off, right?
yep.
Versus, hey, listen, I know this sucks that it's a holiday and you'd rather be home, but I'm here too, and we're here because it's a critical mission. It's
Yep.
important that you be here. We need you. That's a much different message, and you're going to get a much different response out of that.
And I don't want to sound like I'm the smartest person in the world because I'm not. And this isn't the things that I'm bringing forward in this podcast. They're not all my ideas. I'm learning from other people and now regurgitating. So don't think everything I'm saying is like, oh man, I'm this crazy great leader. Like I'm learning. I'm learning still to this day, and I plan to learn until after I retire. But I love seeing how we're shifting the culture for these up and coming officers compared to where I was, and I'm sure compared to where you were when you first came on too, right? So like, I think we keep going back to put the why to the what. We're bringing that
Yeah.
why forward. The more you get that, the more you get the buy-in, the more those frontline troops are going to believe in the mission. And do you want a junior guy that's 22, 23 years old to be dragging feet? This is bullshit. I don't want to be at work today. No, you want him to be looking for bad people. And hopefully we find no bad people and we go home at the end of the day. But you have to get that buy-in. How you get that buy-in is by that explanation process, right? All right, so let's go on to the next bullet. While the senior leader supervises the entire planning process by team members, he must be careful not to get bogged down in the details. By maintaining a perspective above the micro terrain of the plan, the senior leader can better ensure compliance with the strategic objectives.
Yeah, this is something, I won't name names, but I see some some guys, some very senior level leaders uh really getting down in the weeds on stuff and micromanaging. And we've discussed this a little bit on some previous episodes here. And this is yet another example of how all of this ties together, right? I don't know if it's an ego issue where they think, nobody else can do it right, and so they have to do it, or if it's a matter of them not trusting subordinate leaders. I don't know what it is, but you have to fight the urge to do this and give that latitude, give that trust and responsibility to your subordinate leaders, and even the subordinates who are not formal leaders, right? Um, if you're at the strategic level and you're down there making tactical decisions, you can't effectively do your job. You can't do all of it. And I would also just add for the listeners that are maybe not familiar with some of this language, right? When we talk about strategic versus tactical, right? So strategic level stuff, you are planning the big picture, you're addressing the overall guiding strategy, right? So that's your strategic level. And then execution of that, what tactics are we going to employ to get that mission done? That is the tactical level. That's more the boots on the ground level, right? So, your sergeants or squad leaders, or whatever you may have, those are tactical level leaders. And your some of your mid-level and certainly your upper level, your executive level management is going to be your strategic level. So when we use that language, that's what we're talking about.
And it reminds me of a quote. I don't remember where I heard this, but it's if you're too busy looking down, you're not looking up and you're definitely not looking forward. And we've all have experienced tunnel vision in one way or the other. Once you're an experienced officer, you've caught yourself in tunnel vision, right? So the more you break yourself from tunnel vision, the more you're aware of your surroundings. The more as a leader that you're involved in the weeds, the more that you're not able to look around, look forward, and look at that strategic goal. Because as a leader, that's what's expected of you. We're expecting our leadership to bring us into the future. And again, to go back to some of the General Mattis stuff and looking at the military, right? It's like if you are only focusing on this battle, you're losing picture of the war. You're losing the bigger picture. And how do we bring that all together? How do we bring this war to an end? Like the first time someone was flanked, nobody thought that that would ever happen to them because they were so used to um, the traditional battle styles. So how do we go forward to the next type of battle, right? That's what we're in. So it's important. And if you find yourself in that tunnel vision, you have to purposely break yourself from it so you can move your department, your squad, your command forward. The
Yeah,
no-
100%. That's a great point. And up and out should be the focus for the strategic level leaders for sure.
yeah, the another great quote from Jocko. Doing so enables senior leaders to stand back and be the tactical genius, to identify weaknesses or holes in the plan that those immersed in the details might have missed. This enables leaders to fill in those gaps before execution. I mean, that brings it all together for that point.
I don't tell too many personal stories on this platform, but I'll give you one because I think it's a funny and good illustration of what we're talking about here, right? Um, doing my first stalk as a sniper, right? I'm training and you know, did all these classes and everything, learning all of the field craft. And I get a good approach to the target, and I'm putting uh trees and objects between me and the objective, and trying to mask my movement and so on and so forth. And I get to this stretch of like hip high grass, right? And it's a pretty long stretch, and I got to cross this, and it's tricky, uh very still wind that day, but every so often, every few moments, you would get just a little breeze, and the breeze was crossing the field from left to right. So what I was doing, if you can picture this, I'm laying on my stomach, and as the breeze would come across and blow that grass from left to right, I would take my right arm and I would move that grass down from left to right in front of me, and I'd flatten it out, and then I'd pull myself forward, right, and cover that arm's length distance every time there was a little breeze. And it took me uh, quite a while, couple hours to get across this section, but I did it without being seen. And I'm thinking I'm in great shape to get into my final firing position. And as the saying goes, if you're not cheating, you're not trying. So I hear them sending a walker onto another guy that was in a different position, and I'm thinking, okay, they're focused on him now, and I've got a good, nice sized tree in between me and the objective. I'm gonna use this opportunity to make up some time and cover some distance. So I start to stand up and close the distance to that tree, and I hear freeze, right, and I start what we call melting. I'm trying to melt back into the terrain, and I hear "Stop fucking melting!" I'm like, "Oh man, I'm busted." Where did I go wrong? And number one, and it turned out, by the way, I was extremely close, much closer than I realized. And when I stood up, I just stood up in the open, right in front of these guys, in front of the spotters. So number one mistake was in the planning phase. I failed to shoot an azimuth to my objective, and so I wasn't checking that as I went, and so I veered off path very, very slightly. Every time I moved that grass down with my right hand, I veered just a little bit to the right, and I ended up kind of making a big wide right hand turn. And so now I was disoriented. The tree that I thought I was looking at was a different tree, and the vehicle, the objective, was in a completely different place than where I thought it was. And really what it was about was I was literally down in the weeds, and my focus was only on what was right in front of me at arm's length. And I lost that situational awareness. I lost sight of the objective. I literally lost sight of all the really important things because I was so focused on these little details. And you know, just completely messed myself up there and got thrashed for it as well. So just like I said, kind of a funny literal example of what we're talking about.
Well, thank God it was in that environment, right?
Yeah, right. Well, that's where you want to make those mistakes. And
Absolutely. Absolutely.
trust me, I learned and never made a mistake like that again.
And that's the important thing. I tell all the guys I work with too. It's like the first mistake, you got that. If I tell you twice, we're starting to get to an issue. Let's leave it at that, right?
Yeah.
But it's especially important in those incidents. But all right, to move on to the next point. Once a detailed plan has been developed, it must then be briefed to the entire team and all participants and supporting elements. If frontline troops are unclear about the plan and yet are too intimidated to ask questions, the team's ability to effectively execute the plan radically decreases. That like hits home so much with me and
This is huge.
everything that you and I have talked about, right? And I have personal relationships with people that I work with. A couple of the newer guys, I'm not to that level yet, but I set the tone very early that you need to approach me. I want you to come to me. Don't go behind my back. Like, let's figure this out. There's going to be bigger problems if you do things behind my back and don't come forward rather than you just come and bring it to me. Because let's be real, a majority of cops don't lose their job for what they did, it's for what they failed to do. It's for what they failed to report. It's for what they failed to bring forward. And I set that tone very early because I want the people to know it's not that you won't be held accountable. It's that I want you to bring this information forward sooner than later. If you're doing that with the smaller things, with maybe a vehicle dent, maybe you forgot your weapon at home, which has happened. We have spare guns. It's not a big deal. I definitely don't want you to go on patrol without a gun. Don't fear a write-up. Something like that. God forbid. Could you imagine if a cop went on patrol without a handgun because he was too afraid to tell
Oh,
his
I can do more than imagine it.
There's a reason we bring that up, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
but the more you establish those relationships for the smaller things, the more guys are going to want to come to you and be like, "Hey Lou, guess what?" To go back to the motor vehicles example, it might sound ridiculous, but I think we should really push to get speed humps installed. I think that we should look at an engineering aspect. Maybe we need a traffic light. Maybe we need a pedestrian crossing with the flashing symbol. Um, Something like that, like getting these guys to think outside the box. Because if you build that trusting relationship with the smaller things, they're going to feel empowered to bring those other things forward. Because a lot of junior cops wouldn't want to bring that forward to a lieutenant. And the more you get that relationship going early, and the more that they bring some of their smaller mess ups, we all did it.
And they need to be able to bring those issues up in a briefing setting as well. You
Yeah.
don't want to wait. God forbid somebody doesn't understand what you're briefing to them. They don't understand the plan. They don't understand their role and your expectations of them, but you haven't established that relationship. And now they're afraid to raise their hand and ask the question, right? Now they're out there. They have no idea what they're doing. God forbid, it's something serious, right? And now for whatever reason you're not available or they don't have somebody next to them that can provide some guidance, they're beat, right?
Yep.
So they've got to be able to bring up those questions in that briefing environment. And one of the practical things that I like to do to make sure that we're achieving this thing right here, again, keeping the directions simple, clear, and concise so that everybody can understand it. But then going to that junior man, or perhaps the person that you think may, how do I put this politely? The least academically inclined, or you know, uh, have them brief it back to you.
Yep.
Go to that person, whether it's your junior man or whoever. All right, hey, brief it back to me. Tell me what your role is in this mission here, right? Or tell me what the plan is, right? If they can brief it back to you, good to go. If not, okay, let's go over this again, right? It's a very simple, easy thing that we can do to make sure that we're checking this box.
Oh, absolutely. All right, let's go into the next point. The plan must mitigate, identify risks where possible. A good plan must enable the highest chance of mission success while mitigating as much risk as possible. There are some risks that simply cannot be mitigated, and leaders must instead focus on those risks that can actually be controlled.
Yes. That last part there, I think, for law enforcement is the key to this whole thing. When Jocko teaches leadership in the business setting and whatnot, it's a completely different world that they're dealing with. And when they talk about risk, it's different kinds of risks, right? For law enforcement leaders, you cannot be risk averse and you cannot mitigate every risk. Our work is inherently dangerous by its very nature. There are going to be risks that we have to take. There are going to be dangers that we have to face. That's the nature of the beast here. So the key is identifying those risks that we can reasonably mitigate. So we're not taking unnecessary risks. We're not being cavalier. We're not, risking people's lives needlessly. But you have to have both the moral and the physical courage to recognize that certain risks can't be mitigated. We got to get the job done, right?
And I think we've done a very good job as a profession over the last decade to evolve a lot in that aspect, especially when it comes to barricaded subjects and how the shift has, how we've gotten to where we are now. Um, Time as a tactic, huge
Right,
piece of the new use of force policy. We
right,
use time as a tactic, and it's not just a hostage negotiator. Everybody is now going to CIT training.
yeah,
Everybody is now moving forward in that development. But it is not the, hey, let's rush the door. And unfortunate incidents have happened where people were only injurious to themselves, barricaded in an area, and officers on scene thought they were doing the right thing, saying, we need to bring this to an end. And they rushed that scene. They rushed in and they took that person, tried to take that person into custody, and that person created a suicide by cop situation.
right,
Nobody
right,
wants that. Nobody wants that situation. But I think we're doing a lot better as a profession with the training that we're receiving, with even what the Attorney General has pushed down for us to let us know that, hey, like, we're going to use that time as a tactic. And even the thought of, we don't need to apprehend somebody today, we can apprehend that person later. We
right,
identified them. You have somebody well identified, we're not engaging in a vehicle pursuit. What's the immediate risk? What's the risk to the public overall? This person's wanted for a robbery. Great. First degree crime, maybe with involving a handgun. But is the risk to the public greater by pursuing this person today? We know who he is. We'll just apprehend him later and just add more charges. Hopefully, he goes to jail longer
right.
next time that we catch him. Maybe that day he'll give up instead of running. So, like, I think that we're doing a better job in that sense.
Sure. I do want to address the flip side of that coin though. And I'm going to preface my next statement because I know this can be sensitive and our detractors would pounce on something like this. So I'll say you are 100% right about, time as a tactic, time, distance, and shielding, all the CIT stuff. And I'm a CIT instructor. I was a negotiator, ICAT enable instructor, all that stuff. I understand it. I teach it. I've applied it. I get it.
And
All
they've
that
even
being
they've
said,
even coined the phrase of tactical withdrawal to make it cool to
yeah,
withdraw.
yeah. Um, but right, and there's always a but. In the words of the late great and immortal Patton, right? An imperfect plan executed violently right now is always better than a perfect plan executed too late. Okay, and again, I understand. Cops in this day and age, we've got to be very careful. Talking about being violent and all that kind of stuff, but understand what I'm saying here. Look at a prime example of this, right? Look at Uvalde. Okay. Prime example of sitting around trying to come up with a perfect plan, trying to mitigate every risk and taking too much time. And what happened during that time, right? Absolute tragedy and absolutely unacceptable to the public, right? Everybody looked at that and said, man, those guys really failed in that situation. So, as with all things, balance is key. And as professionals, we have to be able to recognize which to apply in a given situation, right? So, certainly, where possible, we want to slow things down, use time as a tactic, all that stuff. That's huge. Mitigate the risks as much as possible, but also understand again as leaders, we have to have and exercise moral and physical courage. We've got to accept that we can't mitigate every risk, and there are situations that call for immediate, bold, decisive action.
And I'll bring up a perfect example of what you just said that happened yesterday on February 6th, 2024, Fort Myers, Florida. There was a hostage situation. Bank robber held a knife to a hostage's throat. I'm looking at this article right now on Police One. and the bank robber taken out by a sniper. He was shot and killed while he was holding somebody at knife point by a sniper.
Very tense scene unfolding in Florida. A hostage standoff at a Bank of America. The suspect claiming to have a bomb and holding a knife to a woman's neck. A sniper then opening fire with the hostages right there. Victor Akendo from Florida tonight.
Tonight, the terrifying moment. The SWAT team coming face to face with a bank robber who took 2 hostages.
Listen, just come out here, let me see your hands, and we'll work with you. We'll work with you.
Tense negotiations. You can hear the suspect raising his voice. Deputies urging him to surrender.
I know you're going through a lot, but this isn't going to make what you're going through any easier.
Authorities racing to the scene of this Bank of America branch in Fort Myers, escorting people out of the building, deploying a robotic dog.
Shortly after 11 a.m., we received a call of a bank robbery in progress with multiple hostages.
The sheriff identifying the suspect as 36-year-old Sterling Alavache, saying he claimed to be carrying a bomb and armed with a knife.
He started to put one of the hostages in like a headlock, and he had the knife to her throat.
Suddenly, a sniper opening fire, shooting the suspect dead, freeing the hostages. The sheriff said the sniper feared for the hostage's life, and that's when they opened fire. Both hostages were unharmed.
Talk about what it takes with the confidence of your training, confidence of your experience to be able to take that shot in that moment, in this environment. But exactly what you're saying, like there is definitely times where time is a tactic. I think I talked about on this podcast I had a guy 6 hours knife to his throat right in front of one of our bus garages in Patterson. I sat there for 6 hours and it came to a peaceful resolution. This sniper had the wherewithal to know that this guy needed to be taken out. And there was more to this story too. He was making bomb threats. He said that there were explosives on scene.
Sure.
But those officers, exactly what you said, that was a violent plan executed perfectly at that moment when it had to, because you know what, like if we fail to act and somebody was killed, what are the questions going to be asked on that other side of the coin? Just exactly like you said.
That is a great example. And the other thing that brings to light too, that I would touch on just very quickly is, and it's something very important for leaders to grasp, the success of that mission started years prior to that day, right? The success of that mission relied upon essentially the fact that that man was prepared for that situation before he ever got there, right? Through his training and education, his devotion to professional development and developing a skill set, when he was put in that challenging situation, he was ready to meet that challenge and he was ready to take that decisive action. As leaders, that is something that we need to not only accept, but strive every day to achieve that level of excellence, right? So, reading and going to leadership courses, like aggressively pursuing your professional development and your education, your training, so that when you are in that situation as a leader, you're ready. Because if you wait until that moment to start preparing, you are going to fail.
Absolutely. And that's part of leadership in itself, cultivating that and bringing that out of that person. And I don't know this officer, I don't know his department at all, but I hope that from a young time in his agency, he was brought into that position purposefully. And how that happens is by the conversations. And I know we talked about this in other podcasts, but it's worth revisiting one more time. As a leader, as a supervisor, you should be meeting with your subordinates and getting an idea of what their career path is and helping them carve exactly where they want to be. It might not actually get to where they ultimately want to go, but the more that you can guide them and keep them on course, the more that you'll have buy-in from them over the course of their 25 to 30-year career. And that's in everybody's interest. That's in the community's best interest. That's in the department's best interest. And it's in his or her best interest. We want those people to be successful, because the more they're successful, the more that we're successful, and the more that the community as a whole grows. That's important.
Yeah. And that's something too, with my guys in my unit, for example, and I lead a very small unit. But I'm nonetheless immensely proud of the work that my guys do, and they're some of the best cops that I've ever worked with, and that's saying a lot. But we have a board in our office, and it's mid-range and long-term goals for the unit and for each of my guys as individuals. The short range stuff, that's in our our regular meetings where we discuss, okay, over the next week or month, what do we got to get done, what are we prioritizing, and so on and so forth. But we keep an eye on those mid-range and long-term goals, whether it be professional development, education, promotion, whatever the case may be. Particular schools that we want to get them to, certifications, whatever. And as their boss, as their leader, it's my job to make sure that I'm keeping them focused on those things, but also that I'm doing everything I can, everything within my power, to make sure that I'm helping them to check those boxes off, check off those goals, right? If there's a school they want, okay, not only was I made aware of it when they told me, hey, I want to go to this, but it's on the board so I can see it all the time. And I'm reminded, hey, am I getting this? Am I doing everything I can to get that goal accomplished for this guy? Yep. It's a very simple, easy thing to do that can make a huge difference in a guy's career.
And one more point I want to bring up before we get to that checklist. The best SEAL units after each combat operation conduct what we called a post-operational debrief. No matter how exhausted from an operation or how busy planning for the next mission, time is made for this debrief because lives and future mission success depend on it. What went right? What went wrong? And sometimes the what went wrong is more important than what went right. I'll give you a perfect example going back to New Year's Eve of this year. So we have a budgetary issue this year that we didn't have in years past. And not to get too deep into that, but they wound up our afternoon shift that normally gets off at 12:30 got held over till 3 a.m. instead of 6 a.m. like they would in previous years. 3 a.m. is when last call happened in Hoboken, and bars didn't actually close until 4 a.m. So it was an oversight in the planning process. I lost 70% of my personnel. I worked until 5 a.m. that day. I lost 70% of my personnel at 3 a.m. There was a large bar fight that spilled into the street right into our bus terminal at Hoboken Terminal at 3:05 a.m. I wish I was making that up, but I gave that information to the incident commander, who's a captain, and now at the very least next year we know we're going to push past bar closing time. And again, I still consider myself a relatively junior leader, but they've empowered me to make sure that I'm giving that information. But if we don't have that debrief, that the responsibility of that falls on me. It falls on the captain for not asking those questions, ultimately falls on even the chief of police for not allowing that information. But something as simple as that, like, you have to have debriefs after large incidents. And even if it's a pre-planned incident, critical incidents, they should always be debriefed. And part of that debriefing always has to go back to resiliency, making sure that we're talking to our officers, making sure that you just experienced something that was life altering. You may have just saw a child die. You might have seen heinous acts against a child. It's okay to not be okay with that. You shouldn't be okay with that. These are disgusting crimes that we have to investigate as police officers. It's perfectly fine. If you want to talk to somebody about it and that person's not me, we have EEO, we have counselors, you have health insurance that's pretty damn good. You could go talk to a counselor. That has to be part of that debriefing process. And I'm so proud of where the profession has gone. It's so important to keep that going forward and make that okay. It's okay to be upset. It's okay to not be okay with what you see. The more that we push that forward, the better we're going to be as a profession.
Yeah. That's one of those things that separates those elite teams, those elite performers from the rest, is that they take the time and really commit themselves to going that extra mile and doing things like the debriefs. And it can make a tremendous difference in a number of ways, not the least of which being for us the resiliency component, which is as we know, extremely important.
Absolutely. You want to run through that checklist?
Yeah. So if anybody that's listening to this right now is in a leadership position, this next part, it's the last part of this chapter, and it provides you with a great tool. It is a leader's checklist for planning. And there's a list of 11 things there. So if you want to hit the pause button, grab a notepad or something like that, you may find this to be really useful. And maybe Joey, when you edit this, you can throw it up on the screen there.
I'll even throw it in the description for everybody.
Excellent, excellent. So yeah, so we got 11 points. Under a few of these, there's some like sub bullets. Okay, so I'll break them down. But number one, we have analyze the mission. Under that, 2 sub points: understand higher headquarters mission, commander's intent, and end state, or the goal, right? And number 2, identify and state your own commander's intent and end state for the specific mission. Bullet number 2, identify personnel, assets, resources, and time available. Number 3, decentralize the planning process. Under that, we have empower key leaders within the team to analyze possible courses of action. Bullet number 4, determine a specific course of action. Sub-bullets there, we have lean towards selecting the simplest course of action and focus efforts on the best course of action. Bullet number 5, empower key leaders to develop the plan for the selected course of action. Number 6, plan for likely contingencies through each phase of the operation. This is huge for us, by the way. I'm not going to deep dive on all of these, but in our profession, you got to have contingency plans. Plan A is almost always going to go to hell. You got to have a plan B, right? So, bullet number 7, mitigate risks that can be controlled as much as possible. We talked about that quite a bit. Number 8, delegate portions of the plan and brief to key junior leaders. Under that, we have stand back and be the tactical genius, right? Number 9, continually check and question the plan against emerging information to ensure that it still fits the situation. Most of our leaders, when it comes to planning and strategic level planning, they're used to the ICS, the Incident Command System, and NIMS and all that kind of stuff. You should have some intel component. So you need to be continually refreshing intel and checking your plan against that new information, right? To make sure that we're still on the right course. Bullet number 10, brief the plan to all participants and supporting assets. Don't leave out your supporting assets. This may include EMS. This may include your dispatchers. It may include your school crossing guards. Make sure that all of your assets are well informed, right? 2 bullets under this: make sure that you're emphasizing the commander's intent, and ask questions and engage in discussions and interaction with the team to ensure that they understand, right? So I touched on this before. You can have somebody brief back, but also as you go, you can be asking questions or finding other ways to engage the team to make sure that you have their attention, that they fully understand everything you're trying to convey. And then last, conduct post-operational debrief after execution. And under that, we have analyze lessons learned and implement them in future planning. Huge, right? It's not just we want to talk here and now about what we just did, but we've actually got to do something with that information. When we say, hey, we should do it differently next time, somebody's got to write that down somewhere. Somebody's got to memorialize that so that we can actually go back and use those lessons down the road.
And there has to be accountability to that as well.
Yeah.
And just to go back real quick to brief the plan to all participants and supporting assets, 2 previous examples that we've brought up in this leadership series, there was Napoleon's corporal, and there was also General Mattis going out to the foxhole, right? When you have the most junior person in the room, the lance corporal, the probationary police officer that just finished FTO, when that person is able to explain your plan back to them, your plan is able to be recited by that person. you hear your words, your intent coming from that person, that is a message well delivered. And that's the way that it should be done. And if you're able to get the junior most person to give it to the most senior ranking officer in a room, that means you're doing a lot of good things in your organization. It means that you have leadership. It means that you have trust building. It means that you have everything that we've talked about. It means that that senior leader is taking extreme ownership of his mission and extreme ownership of everything that's occurring. Because to care that much about a probationary police officer, in that officer's mind, it's going to get so much buy-in from him. He's going to do that job so well to the best of his ability, and everybody is going to win in that situation.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I appreciate everybody for joining us again for another episode of our leadership series. We look forward to continuing with this book. We have a couple more episodes left. Again, if you guys would like to join us on a future episode and something that you're passionate about, we would love to have more guests as we wrap up this leadership series. Until next time, Joey Sperlaza.
Colin Congleton.
Looking forward to working with you guys in the future. Stay safe.
This podcast is brought to you by the J. Harris Academy of Police Training. J. Harris Academy of Police Training is based in New Jersey and provides law enforcement training services nationwide for promotional examinations, use of force, supervisory development, and other key areas within law enforcement. This podcast is utilized to discuss key topics occurring within the profession. The opinions and information provided is for entertainment purposes only. In an effort to provide this, we often purposely discuss opposite views and opinions to spark conversation and develop discussion points. The contents of the show and show notes are all copyrighted. All blog posts, podcasts, and show notes that are distributed to the public for free can be redistributed via hard copy or electronic copy for free only if the J. Harris Academy of Police Training is included as the acknowledged author within the actual media that is redistributed. This entire disclaimer also applies to any guests or contributors to the podcast or blog. Under no circumstances shall the J. Harris Academy of Police Training, any guests, contributors to the podcast or blog, or any employees, associates, or affiliates of the company be responsible for damages arising from the use of the information provided.